What's up? It's your man, Pastor Jay, with another reflection on devotion. Today we're looking at Romans chapter 11, verses 17 through 36. Had a brief sabbatical and actually forgot to post this one. We'll do it earlier, so I'm going to do two and back to back, just so we can kind of separate it. I don't want to get too long. But today we're looking, again, this verses 17 through 36. And Paul is advancing this idea of the branches and being cut off and grafted in and that type of thing. But it's important that we notice that he is very specific to tell the Gentiles, the ones who are grafted in verse 18, do not be arrogant toward the branches, but if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. And so he wants us to make sure that we understand that it is not anything that we did ourselves that allowed us to be grafted in. It was all the work of God to do it. But we, again, human nature, we're like that. We are arrogant people. Pride is the original sin. And so he wants to warn us against that. And then he's going to go on to explain why we need to be that way. In verses 21 and 22, says, for if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Behold then the kindness and severity of God. For those who fell, severity, but to you God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you also will be cut off. And so he for those who share this view that once you're saved, then you can never be lost, Paul refutes that in this text, because he's saying as long as you continue. Now, he's also clear in other verses that that God never separates his love from us. But he is also clear that we have the ability to separate ourselves from God. It is our decision. And so this again is another little bit that talks about that. In verse 24, he kind of shares the fact that he says, if you were cut off from, if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree, and were grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will those who are natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? So what he's saying is there is redemption available for those who were the house of Israel, who rejected Christ, but there's grace for them to come back and accept Christ. And he goes into detail on this in verses 25 and 26. He says, for I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel will be saved. You got to understand, God does not want anyone to be lost. That's the reality. He doesn't want anyone to be lost. So he's letting us know that even those who have rejected Christ initially will have the opportunity to be saved. That the whole purpose of them hardening their hearts was for the Gentiles, for us to have the opportunity to come into the Abrahamic covenant. At the state that Israel was in when Christ came, they were rejecting, they were not allowing Gentiles to partake of this covenant. And so Jesus had to come and open that door for us to be able to come in. But what he did was he helped, again, we see other examples in the Bible where God hardened the heart of someone, particularly Pharaoh, when Moses and the children of Israel were being released. However, this hardening of Israel's heart was for the purpose of opening the gospel, for doing what they were supposed to have done in the first place. Remember, God's always going to carry out his mission, regardless of how whoever rejects it or refuses to do it. He's going to find a way to make sure that his will is done. And so he did this so that the Gentiles would have the opportunity to get under the Abrahamic covenant. And then he tells in verse 30, for just as you once were disobedient to God, but now have been shown mercy, because of their disobedience, so these also now have been disobedient, that because of the mercy shown to you, they also may be shown mercy. So God is not a respecter of person. He's going to provide mercy for everyone who is willing to accept it. And so we need to keep this in mind. And he's, again, making this argument as he closes out this particular chapter, that we have to remember that God is gracious to everyone. He doesn't want anyone to be cut off. We are cut off because of our own accord, our own pushing him away. But he wants to graft us in. He wants to reattach those that have been cut off. So let's remember that when we're dealing with those that we feel are outside of the church, or doing things that are not in accordance with God's will, we have to understand that God is having mercy on them as well. As long as there's breath in their body, they have the ability to accept Christ as their Savior. So we don't want to write anybody off, because God hasn't written anybody off. And I just pray that today we'll be an agent for redemption to help someone see Christ's love in us. I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time on Reflection on Devotion. God bless.